our first call here is Cole from Washington, D.C. He, him, experienced as a teenager that may be comparable to what people mean when they say they had a personal experience with God.
All right.
Hey, Cole, how are you?
Oh, the sound just cut out.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, it's back.
Okay.
Excellent.
So
Yeah,
you want to tell us about your experience?
As a teenager, I was having a really terrible day at the time. Had been having bad days off and on for a while. You know, I don't know how else to describe it other than like I was probably depressed is what was going on at the time. But the thing that kind of like people will describe, oh, they found religion and it turned their life around. I sort of found myself, I guess, and it turned my life around. I saw a reflection, my reflection in some frosted glass, but because it was frosted, what actually registered in my brain was there's like an older version of myself looking back out at me from the glass. And I at the time was very much into multiverses and interdimensional, split second travel are definitely a thing and are definitely happening. And when people have those stories of there was nobody in the room when I walked in and then I turned around, there was nobody in like a public bathroom where they walked in and then nobody came in or out, but somehow there was a confused person in there when they went to leave. I definitely believed all of those things were happening. So I sort of assumed that this reflection in a mirror that definitely wasn't my own face I had seen just a little tiny glimpse into another parallel universe, like the waves had overlapped at just the right moment or something like that. And at the time I attributed it to definitely multiverse stuff happening. And then I forgot about it for a while. And what I'm tentatively attributing to it now is my brain just sort of ran out of anxiety juice at the time, and went from, there's a 3-state brain model that's going around recently that seems to describe things, the conscious discipline brain state model it's called. I flipped directly from survival state to executive state is what seems like what it would be described as.
So would you say that now you believe that the experience as you thought it wasn't what you thought it was? You have a different idea about the whole experience now?
Yeah.
Or do you think that you just might have a different idea about the experience?
No, I'm given the fact that I was in a state of extreme turmoil and actively crying my eyes out. You can't always see the best when you got water in there and whatnot.
Yeah, plus you're looking into frosted glass, right?
Yep. I've looked into perfectly clear mirrors and not recognized my own face before. But at the time, it was really meaningful because I needed an adult to be there for me, and there wasn't one. And this reflection of my older self in the mirror that I saw then became that adult. And that, unfortunately ended up being my support system for a bit.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that had to happen. I really am. And it sounds like you're in a better space now. Would that be safe to say? Yes. Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes. I've definitely that was half a lifetime ago. But that was I've had ups and downs since then.
Mm-hmm.
But I had completely forgotten that even happened until I looked back through an old journal, and I was writing to what had initially started out as a character for a story that I was writing, who then I decided was, yep, that's definitely me, that dude. And you like alternate universe version of yourself that's way cooler and has like super hearing abilities and yada yada yada.
So what did you end up like as you move forward in your life? How did this experience affect you? Was it in a positive way? Was it a negative way? Do you feel how do you feel post experience about it?
I mean, I don't really remember when I completely forgot about it. I guess it must have been like a couple of years afterwards. I just sort of stopped writing in that journal for a while. And then I didn't even think about it until I ran across it, moving stuff around. At the time, it was probably a lifesaver. Because I realized that I could, like, sort of actively talk to what I thought was another person, but was actually just myself. And then later, of course, got into therapy and whatnot, and then learned that, hey, that's an actual technique that people use. But I had
So you would say in the end it was a
out.
positive experience for you.
Yes.
The end result was positive for you.
End result was positive, and I really only thought that I saw or interacted with this other universe that one tiny split second. Like I just had this glimpse into another, universe where, like, hey, it's possible for me to be happy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if it's possible over there, it could potentially be possible over here. So don't give up, type of thing.
I always kind of call that type of experience in my life. I always called it like a focus point, where like everything that I was gets kind of like funneled down into this little point where I get this great introspection, and it comes out on the other side and just makes me a wider, broader person for the most part. So it sounds to me like you're having what I would call a focal point in your life. Would you say that's kind of like about what was going on? And are you saying that kind of experience is what many people that you think is what many people believe is an experience with God or a higher power?
I think so. I mean, at least some people who describe, like, I was at this really, really low point, and then I had this unexplained thing happen, and felt all of this love coming from somewhere. I don't know where. That kind of talk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was just this overwhelming sense of, like, comfort and safety, but it wasn't that I assumed was coming from, alternate universe self gave you a little poke, but was, more, clearly don't have any evidence of that. So we know that brains do various things to try to keep the organism alive. Including sort of parenting yourself if that's not an available, if a caregiver is not emotionally prepared to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely have an instinct to survive, right?
That. Yeah.
Yeah. So
but that sort of going from that sense of being vastly in despair, and then all of a sudden you don't know where it's coming from, but your brain is producing the happy, safe, warm chemicals. If people don't know those kinds of that brains do that, or that if you are anxious for a long, like if you are acutely stressed for a long enough period of time, sometimes your brain, has run out of that neurotransmitter. All of them are actively in use right now, and so it can't create more. So it just sort of pauses that reaction, or you start dissociating. And then, but people may interpret going from that everything is horrible to all of a sudden snap, hey, things might be manageable, or like that feeling of everything is horrible has gone away mysteriously. And if people don't know that brains do stuff like that, and they have heard about mystical beings, they may then assume that, oh, that's what everyone's talking about. That's this mystical being.
Right. Matt, do you have want to jump in or add something?
Well, there's a couple of things. The first one is I want to commend you, Cole, on how you've approached this, because it sounds like at the time it was really, really good for you. And there's a few other things that you said, particularly on like we didn't have any evidence of being parallel universes, that since then you've actually still taken a very rational view of it. You've said, okay, but what do we know? What can we produce? But you've still held on to the positive sort of psychological benefit that it provided. And I just want to point out that you can't underestimate just how powerful narratives are to people. I've read papers that have gone through, and this is one thing that we're trying to communicate in science. It's what I have some understanding on. Unfortunately, psychology is not my strong suit. But narratives and just having a story or an idea of that narrative, if we have a problem and then we find a solution and we work towards it, is very, very strong. And also, I think you're right. The brain only has a limited time that it can stay in states of sort of extreme anxiety and pressure before something has to give. And I think, I think it's very notable that in a lot of those cases, it is the person who's going through that does the hard work to get it to come out of it. The human brain is very, very powerful, but it's also very complicated. These things are not like you can't just flick an automatic switch and be like, okay, I'm going to be happy now. It takes a lot of work. But sometimes, you reach a point before your brain can actually turn that corner and be like, we've been at this level for so long that we can't sustain. And so I totally agree that I think a lot of that sort of process is how some people have experiences that they would associate with a deity or a god of some kind. Now, is that going to be the case all the time? Almost certainly not. But I think that's a very good point, that in at least many cases, that's probably what happened. And I do like the idea of parallel or multi-universes, but yes, I unfortunately have to agree that, we don't have any evidence for at least being able to communicate with them.
Yeah.
As much as I want to.
I do really like, I'm starting to wonder if maybe that's why I like reading stories of, oh no, this character got swapped to a parallel universe version of their thing where instead of being in space, now same story, but regular Earth or other way around. All of these parallel universe type stories. I wonder if that's kind of where I got my interest in that from. Or I really like the quote that humans are storytellers, or we are the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And as I said,
players
rewrites itself and changes. There's definitely some events that I remember, and still actively do remember happening a certain way, but I know for a fact that is not how it happened. That is not the order of events that happened, but that is what my brain, I cannot remember stuff happening in the order that I know it happened in, as listening to from other people, no, this happened first.
Yeah, memory's a fickle thing.
I think I would add that from my understanding, memories also, like when you recall memories, so this is after the fact, you tend to recall the emotions that you felt at the event more than you do the actual specifics of the event. And so that, I guess, makes a lot of sense that, you're not going to remember all the order, and it can feel a bit strange. But I guess from a survival point of view, our memories are there so that we learn lessons, not necessarily remember exactly how we learned those lessons. And so maybe that's why, be my non-psychological take on it.
That makes a lot of sense. And, that gave me a thought. You know how sometimes people will have, like, kind of a heated argument with a family member or a loved one or whatever, and then later on they go back and talk about it, and the person goes, I never said that, and they definitely did. Like, maybe, you were in a situation where you were trying to avoid being gaslit and have recorded this person. It's like, no, you definitely said that.
I think we've all experienced that with people. I think it's a pretty common experience.
I wonder if it's just that sometimes people aren't actually remembering what words came out of their mouth because they were thinking more with the emotional state of their brain, and then words are just coming out, as opposed to remembering the actual order of events.
Yeah, it's possible.
I think you see that. So I've seen, like, when you see anecdotes online about, and I guess in relevance to this show, you might, and what we were mentioning earlier in terms of people having it as experiences of a higher power, to keep it fairly broad. I think that's a good point, because you won't remember it in terms of the exact details. You'll remember the emotion. And so that can slowly override the exact procedure. Now, in some cases, it's like the one you brought up, Cole, is quite, like, that can be quite bad, because then, you can be prone to gaslighting people, forgetting important aspects. And if you're talking about this definitely proves X higher power exists, then it can get problematic, but it is still very useful to keep that in mind about how human memory works. But I feel like, unfortunately, that's pushing the areas I'm super familiar with, which, just as a side note for everyone, you're talking to someone who's spent a lot of time in science when they spend half the day saying, that's not my area, this is my understanding.
Yep. It's like, don't quote me on this, I don't actually really know what I'm talking about.
Despite the fact that a lot of the people I've spoken to who've said that probably still forgotten more about that topic than I've ever known.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, do you have anything else for us, Cole?
Not that I can think of.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you today. I want to thank you so much for calling in. I do have a bunch of other callers on the line though, so I don't want to just throw you off, but I have to just throw you off. So, but it was a wonderful call. I really appreciate you calling in, and feel free to call back again.